Rewilding. I don't think I'd heard of the term rewilding until maybe a year or two ago, and what it means, I assume, is that where things had been domesticated, tamed, put under man's control, they were allowed to go back to a more wild state. Not necessarily fully, but at least some of the way. And it's a concept that has grown very rapidly in the last few years, obviously mainly as a result of the ecological movement, because it's become apparent since, 30, 40 years, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, that we are heading for a catastrophe in terms of climate and ecology, destruction of species, destruction of forests, glaciers, the ocean, and so on. And one small step that even ordinary individuals with small gardens can take is to rewild them, to allow them to become more natural. And this is what I've done. I think COVID has exacerbated it, because in that period of peace and absence of traffic and so on, one has become more aware of nature. The sound has gone down, the skies seem clearer of aeroplanes and the rest of it. So you feel nature around you more. And so 2, 3, 4 years ago, our fairly wild garden already, because we'd stopped growing vegetables and we'd let a lot of plants and trees grow up, we decided to let it go and take care of itself. I wouldn't use anything except a pair of secateurs, those are cutters, or maybe a scythe occasionally, but no motorised mowing if possible. This year I haven't mowed at all, the first year I think since we've ever been here that I haven't done so. Just keeping the paths open and then watching nature. There are 2 species of plants that I don't encourage in certain places. One are nettles, because they sting us and our visitors, and the other are wild blackberries, which are rambling, move very fast and would overtake the whole garden, so I cut those back. And the pleasure of rewilding is to realize that nature doesn't go mad. I think part of it all is a sort of reclassifying of the world, because before, the domestication rested on the fact that I and others made a big separation between undesirable things, we call them weeds and so on, and desirable planted flowers and other things that we put in. So the domesticated things were good, and the wild things, except for a few, were to be eliminated. They were like the same in animal kingdom, pests. Certain things were classified as pests. So in my mind, I would walk around the garden 5 years ago and say, oh, look, there's another of those weeds. I must cut it down. Oh, there's another of those trees that aren't the ones I really want here, and I'll dig it up. And it was a lot of effort, and I pursued that, and it took a lot of effort and time and thought, because it's a big garden and I haven't got a gardener. And the relief of not having to do that, and also the relief of seeing that instead of these wild things, weeds and unwanted trees, being a nuisance, they were a pleasure. Many of the things which before I would have said were weeds, little flowers and plants, actually turn out, when you take it slowly and look at them, to be very beautiful and interesting. And in particular, the way in which nature works to weave a growingly complex pattern in one's garden, where plants don't attack each other, but they grow up alongside each other, find some accommodation, and you get a strange little clumps of things, clumps of wildflowers, clumps of new trees coming up. But they don't spread beyond that. There seems to be some sort of demarcation of territory, Certain trees don't allow other trees underneath them. Certain areas stay fairly bare. But most of it turns into a luxuriant, almost a forest. And this is what's happening in a widespread way throughout England. Many farmers, and they were among the forefront of this and wrote books about it, many farmers and others rewilded at least part. And the other extraordinary thing about it was how quickly it happens. We know that if we just watch our streets and we see how quickly, if it's not stopped, grass and other plants will grow up in walls and even in tarmac roads in the cracks. And on these farms, the rewilding immediately, all sorts of unexpected birds and butterflies and animals came back if you just set aside an acre or two to allow it to grow into wild woodland. And so this gives one hope that if this movement continues, and there's no reason why you shouldn't rewild much of that which has been over-domesticated in cities and in countryside, then nature would restore itself. And that, for all of us and for the planet, would be a wonderful thing. Thank you.